Good day. This is the first of a series of lectures over the different materials in the textbook. In case you're wondering about how to access the textbook, you go here and it explains the details. Excuse me. We are using Cengage material, Culture and Values. I mentioned this in the welcome video. There are two volumes. Volume 1 covering chapters 1 through 13, and then volume 2 actually picking up with 13, repeating it, and going through chapter 23. So we have approximately the same number of chapters in each book. So you should already have that access for you. If you purchase the textbook through our bookstore, you will receive the packet with a card that has the ebook code and also a loose leaf version of the textbook. If you purchase the textbook elsewhere, you can go straight to Cengage and buy the e-text. But Cengage Unlimited, as I mentioned in the welcome video, is a way of keeping the cost down for students. So hopefully you have access to the ebook. If you're just using the physical book, which is perfectly fine, you'll just not be able to access the material online that I'm about to show you. And now we get this to collapse again. Bear with us, it takes a little while. There we go. Hopefully you've gone through the Start Here module. Maybe not finished it all, but you should be going through it. And then this is Chapter 1, and this is going to be a video briefly about Chapter 1. Within the overview for Chapter 1, which I provided for you, there are details that are offered. The chapter begins looking at the development of humanity, the human race, how it started, what part of it. One of the interesting parts that they put into Chapter 1 is about the Lacoste cave paintings in France, which date back 20, 30, 40,000 years. They haven't, you can't pin it down too much. Recently, more of these cave paintings have been discovered in caves in Spain. So in France and in Spain, we have a number of these that are very detailed. And again, you have that information there. We're going to be looking, as it says here, at the foundation of humans, the early evidence of human life, what archaeology can discover in the sense of forms of tools and graves, what is located there, the cave paintings themselves, and again, it talks about fundamental human practices. Eventually, the agricultural development, architecture, music, which dates back centuries, actually millennia. And so we will be looking at all those. An idea about civilization. Here are some of the key points you get to look at, and again, here are the details for you. If you click on these, and the links should be working, this will take you to the ebook for the preview. And the preview is just basically a one page. If something went wrong, always, there we go. Let's restart this, see if this will work again. Well, let's try this again. There we go. Let me get this set up. Well, there's the course, and it should be working. So let's try doing this very quickly again. Sometimes the link between Cengage and Canvas get to be a little iffy at times. I actually checked this last week and it was working fine. Again, bear with it. There we go. There's the preview. And so you have some details about what we're looking at, and civilization, and the objectives of what we will learn. Then if we go here and we click on this one, this should take us, it does, it's taking us to chapter 1. So again, sometimes it's just a matter of re-signing in. It may have been a while since, as I said, I accessed this course last week, so they may have signed me out for a bit. Give it a moment and the image will appear. It just takes a while. One more time, we'll restart it. And you should see the face of King Tut here appearing. There it comes. It just takes a while. As I said, I was in here last week, and so I actually went through the entire chapter, making sure it was all showing up. So here we go. There's King Tut. This is a preview, and as you go through the chapter, what you were just seeing previously was at the end of the chapter, and I mentioned this in the welcome video, they always give a summary, basically an outline of the entire chapter that you have just gone through. It doesn't put every detail in it, but it puts quite a bit. Tries to recall for you the information you ran into as you read. It's also very good. This is a very useful place to go when you're taking your reading quizzes or taking your exams. And again, open each of the chapters before you start either of those, and then you won't have to worry about you'll have the tabs already open. So you have these details. With chapter 1, it starts off, of course, talking about some different areas. Well, this is what we call before history, which, as I look at it, the idea about before anything has been recorded. And so you have a number of different areas here. So we have, as I was mentioning earlier about the cave paintings, dating those can be a little difficult, but it is very, very interesting when we have it. The images that you see here are some that have been found. This is a necklace, or possibly a bracelet, but jewelry made out of eagle talons that they date back 130,000 years. This is a key part here that as you're looking at this, that we recognize that you may think of jewelry as being more recent, but no, jewelry has been part of humanity for quite some time. Likewise, we have other areas. This is a shell that has been used as a bowl, as a utensil. This is part of the painting, and believe it or not, yes, artists were graffiti even back then, so that someone in painting the cave painting, this is one in Spain, put a handprint, and that's been preserved for over 35,000 years. These are some of the cave paintings. This is called the Hall of the Bulls. It is in the Lecaux paintings in France. They dated about 16,000. Others have dated earlier than that. This is a musical instrument going back over 30,000 years. So music has been part of humanity for as long as we can really recall. As are statues. This is supposed to represent, seemingly, this is the Venus of Willendorf. It's a fertility figure, probably, which shows a fertility ritual and a belief and a reference. As you go through the chapter, you'll see more about Neolithic. This is, of course, Jericho. For those of you who are familiar with the biblical story, and Joshua and the Israelites when they fought the Battle of Jericho and the walls came tumbling down. Well, Jericho is a real city. There are excavations that have been conducted, and the dating of some of the early views go back to 8,000 BCE or earlier. Likewise, we have other Neolithic aspects, and this is Stonehenge, which you may have heard of. They're dating about 2,500, but probably the earliest form of it, some of the earliest dating go back 4,000 or 5,000 BCE. So that literally Stonehenge, the building of Stonehenge, probably predates the building of the pyramids in Egypt. They use these images as mysterious ladies. Most of these are figurines that are probably related to a fertility ritual of some sort, fertility worship. The idea of the agrarians, when you become agriculturally based, you wind up recognizing the need for fertility and growth. And as such, those early cultures quite often seem to emphasize that in the form of a fertility goddess, a female figure. And so you have others here. These are different ones. You can see the dating back to 6,000 or 7,000. This one was found in Egypt. And then this one goes to other areas. And they go back extensively to an agrarian society, which becomes a key part of the development of civilization. Once the hunter-gatherers stopped trying to hunt and gather, spending their time moving constantly, but instead staying in one place and growing food in the form of crops and also cultivating animals, domesticating those, civilizations change and alter. You start having a stable environment, and that will allow civilizations to foster them and to grow. Well, the early areas is the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia. You have Sumerian and Semitic, and they talk about the details there for you. The Sumerian and the land of Sumer, and you can see the map here, the different details of Sumer here, and Uruk and Ur. Again, if you're familiar with biblical stories, you'll remember the story of Abram, later Abraham, being called from Ur to the promised land that God had offered him. Well, this is Ur. Depictions of some of the areas, such as the White Temple. This is a ziggurat, what looks like a pyramid base, but with a flat surface and then a temple on top of that. This is how it would have looked. This is how it does look. This is in Iraq, and again, early areas where Mesopotamian civilization has started. These are figurines going back, again, almost 5,000 years. They're not very big, but these figurines seem to have been tokens to stand in for the individual who might not be able to come to the temple to offer tokens and sacrifices to the gods. Well, these stood in place for them. They would be left in the temple to represent the individuals, the families who are no longer able to be there. And then these are, you'll see that one on the first page. These are the cuneiforms, the writings that we have. This one is a depiction of a number of different details, a bill of sale. And then this one is a tablet that has musical notations. And once the cuneiforms were deciphered, they recognized that that is what this was doing. So music, again, going back over 3,000 years, and probably earlier. Of course, this is just a surviving tablet. Music was part of humanity, is part of the cultures as they developed and grew. The gods and goddesses of Mesopotamia, you can see these here. Make that a little larger for you. They have different names because different areas, but they represent the different figures that are part of it. You can see how some of those have influences later, because one that is also known as Ishtar, you'll see that name right here. Also known as Inanna, probably is a figure that winds up influencing other figures, such as Isis in Egypt, and also highly possibly Aphrodite in Greece. One of the early stories that we have is the Epic of Gilgamesh, and in this particular one, what we have is a tale about a hero who really does not come across immediately as a hero. The praise is of a king who actually conquers Uruk, and in the stories that we have from the tablets, in the opening part, he has conquered Uruk, he has proclaimed himself king, he is conscripting young men into his army to continue his wars. He also demands first right with brides, so that as the wedding is about to take place, he would show up, take the bride, and then after he is finished, he allows the marriage to continue. It's an interesting story, but really when this was found, the story was somewhat familiar, but the tablets were not found until the 19th century. The looking through and finding those in Nineveh, in the Assyrian library, what was really troubling for a number of theologians is the story of the flood. This is recorded in the story of Gilgamesh as a story of long ago. Gilgamesh, in searching for eternal life, has to travel to the land at the end of forever, and he meets Utnapishtim. He does not earn immortality, but Utnapishtim does tell him how he and his wife became immortal. And the story is about the flood. The gods were trying to take a nap. The humans would not stay quiet. And the result is that the gods decide to destroy all of the humans and cause waters to rise from the ground and to come down from the heavens. It so terrified the gods, in fact, that the gods fled themselves up to the mountains, and people were drowned. That sounds very familiar to Noah in the biblical story. But also what you have is that one of the gods, before all that took place, goes to a man named Utnapishtim and tells him that what is about to happen, and tells him, tear down your house and rebuild it into a boat. Rebuild it into a large ark, and on it take your family, and also take animals, pairs of animals, so that they will survive. And so when the flood finally receded, the gods saw this one man and his family there and said, how did this happen? The God who had helped him didn't say anything. So to keep the story of what the gods had done from everyone else, that they were going to be recreated, the gods promised Utnapishtim and his wife eternal life, but put them at the edge of forever, so that they would not be able to tell their story to anyone. This is all recorded in one of the tablets of Gilgamesh. The dating of the story predates the writing of the flood story in the Old Testament, in the writing of the Hebraic text. And that raised consideration and consternation about which story came first. Did the story in Gilgamesh, the Sumerian epic, come first and the Hebraic people incorporated it? Remember, Ur is not far from Uruk, it's in that same area. So that you have the issue that did the Hebrews, who are descended from Abraham, take the story and incorporate it into their own religious views? Or was the Sumerian story merely another retelling of the Hebraic text? It caused all sorts of issues when this was done, and theologians were not happy with it. Again, in Mesopotamia, what you do wind up having is a development of trade and business, and you have, as this says, a record of a lawsuit. The Akkadian culture comes along, being developed in different areas, and this is probably a masculine Akkadian ruler. You'll notice the intricacies Of course, it's been damaged over the centuries, but look at the intricacies of the design. Move that just a little bit so you can see this. The beard is probably a false beard, so that this man, probably this ruler, probably did not actually have this kind of beard, but would don it for public occasions. This was not uncommon. The Egyptians also did the same thing to a certain extent. Moving through, the Babylonians come along, and one of the rulers of this area was Hammurabi. And one of the first steps that he did was to establish a code so that judgments and lawsuits that you just saw, and the jurisprudence for the entire kingdom, from start up at the top, the northern part, all the way down to the southern area, and you can go back and look at the map of the stretch there, that decisions would be coherent, and they would be cohesive, and they would be equivalent, so that a judge in the northern part of the kingdom could not make one decision for a particular civil case or criminal case, and a judge in the southern part do a very different decision, so that punishment or rewards in a civil case were not significantly different from any region. And to ensure that there was going to be a stable standard, Hammurabi established a law code. It was inscribed on a stele, large, basically a monolith that would be placed in the city, town square, if you will, area, and anyone could come and see the law. They could read. They would know what would happen. And when a judge had a case, it would be in accordance to what the code said. And it gave a stable jurisprudence, the first one really that we know of, so that a law system, a code of criminal and civil decisions was established. It's a really remarkable movement in the sense of development of civilizations. The Assyrians come along a little bit later. They are more of a warlike people who use the chariots and horses and the bow to be very effective. This is the image of the Ishtar Gate, what would have been a gate into the city, into Nebuchadnezzar, again, a name you probably might recognize from the Bible. So this was taken and placed into a museum in Berlin. Again, these are a frieze that details the images. This is in what was Persia, now called Iran, and then the major city was Persepolis. Again, you have images being depicted. Again, notice the wearing of the beards here. And again, probably these were not beards that these individuals themselves had grown. They may have, but they were probably donned for public occasions. Visiting dignitaries, putting it on to create a sense of dignity and authority. Again, this is a movement now to another area, Egypt, one that you may be familiar with. And again, this is Lower Egypt, the north. Upper Egypt is to the south. And the reason for that, again, I'll raise this up for you. The reason for this is where the Nile starts, and it flows north. It goes from south to north. So the upper Nile is down here. The lower Nile is up here. So lower is north, upper is south. For most of Egypt, we think of, in current terms, that up here is the greatest population and where everything is. Well, that wasn't always the case. Giza, you'll see that with Giza quite often. Just outside of Cairo, you have the major pyramids, but those were built as a monument away from what really was the everyday capital. Those are more down in this way. Thebes, Karnak, Luxor, These were some of the major cities. Later moving up to Saqqara and Memphis. But you have different areas. Tel El Amarna becomes a major part under a particular pharaoh. It's also down in this area that you have the Valley of the Kings, the areas where you have the pharaohs. Many of the pharaohs were buried. This is where they found, of course, King Tut. We have the naming of the different kingdoms. They're very original, just as they were original in the different periods of the Stone Ages. You have, of course, Paleolithic, which means old stone, Mesolithic, which means middle stone, and then you have Neolithic, which means new stone. Well, in the naming archaeology for Egypt, they follow something similar. You have the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. The Old Kingdom, they date that back to approximately 2600 BCE. Some will put it earlier, about 3500. Middle Kingdom, about 2000 or so. Some will put about 2200 BCE. The New Kingdom will last about anywhere from 17 to 1500 BCE. And then, of course, they decided to name a fourth one, and instead of naming a kingdom, they just call it the Late Period. And so you have these details that are offered to that one. It says you have different individuals. The Nubians from here invade. You have around 3,500 an invasion that helps to unite both Upper and Lower Egypt, because those were actually separate kingdoms. And eventually you wind up having a united Egypt. And the credit to that goes to Narmer, and that name comes up in just a moment. You have the different gods of Egypt, the religion. They were polytheistic, multiple gods. The main god was Ra, or Amun-Ra. He was a sun god figure who went through different forms and different names as the sun moved through the heavens. So he was an important figure. You have Osiris, the god of the dead. You have Isis, his sister/wife. You have Set, who was the god of chaos. You have Horus, who is sometimes the brother, but most often the son of Isis and Osiris. He's the god of authority who gives the authority to the pharaohs, and then a number of other ones. You'll see a list here. This is not all of them, but this is a number of them that are offered. Ptah here is an interesting figure. He is very similar in appearance and in what he is the god of to Hephaestus in Greece. And again, the supposition is perhaps the exchange of the cultures here led to the creation of that god in Greece. Other aspects go on, and you have the Old Kingdom, the details here. This is the Narmer palette, if it will call up. Sometimes it takes a little while for these images to load. There we go. The Narmer palette, as you'll see, goes back to 3200, which earlier, just 2 pages back, it talked about the Old Kingdom only being about 2600, 2500 BCE. Well, this one puts the Narmer palette at 3200, which would have been when Lower and Upper Egypt were united by King Narmer, which really is the Old Kingdom. So again, how far back it goes is another matter. But what we do know is that this palette shows us the conquering. You'll see Narmer here, the conquering aspect. The other individuals conquered here. The idea of the images to emphasize his authority. Notice how much larger he is than everyone else on the palette. This is one side. On the other side, it shows Narmer wearing the different headdress to show his authority over Upper and Lower. Defeating this image, this figure. Here's Horus, often depicted as a hawk, looking on to Narmer, so that Narmer is then being granted authority by the gods. Again, the dating of it is very difficult. Some has put 3200, some will put earlier, about 3500. This is showing us a time when the kingdoms eventually were united. So the Old Kingdom dating that earlier, even in your textbook, they change up that dating. These are some of the other aspects that we have where in finding the tombs, archaeologists have been able to eventually read the hieroglyphs and know that this is a story that is told about a particular individual. This is a papyrus with a scroll. You have images, the painting on it, and then the hieroglyphs themselves telling the story. Architecture becomes really important. Narmer Palace was found in a temple. This is how some of the early ones look. This is a stepped pyramid that is in Saqqara, which is south of Giza, south of what we now think is modern-day Cairo. It's one of the early ones. These are the famous pyramids, the Great Pyramids in Giza, just outside Cairo. You can see that city off in the distance there. These were built, again, 2500, 2600 BCE, so 4500 years or more. What is happening to many of these, originally these were lime washed, so they gleamed white. Over the centuries, of course, that has faded off. Also, as industrialization has grown in the city, pollutants have come in and started affecting the pyramids, which is terrible to think about, but it does create a sense of damage to them. Again, trying to get this lowered, and Cengage is acting slowly tonight. There we go. The different pyramids are designed for different individuals. You have Dozier's pyramid, which was developed and designed by Imhotep, an architect who's the first one that we know of as an architect, an artist in this way. And Imhotep, in fact, was so important in the society that after his death, as your book tells you, he was deified. He was raised to the level of a god. This, of course, is the Great Sphinx, and again, the restoration of the Great Sphinx is really not possible because unlike the pyramids, which were built out of blocks of stone that were assembled, the Great Sphinx was carved out of the sandstone there in the desert area. They literally carved it out of this area around it. So there's nothing that can be used to replace it because it is one sculpture. This literally is a sculpture in the desert. The Middle Kingdom comes along. You have more development. You have art and architecture changing, developing. You have the tombs being built out of the rock. This is where the Valley of the Kings develops. This is some details from Father to Son instructions. How to conduct yourself. It's basically saying that you do what you're supposed to do. Do not worry about others. Don't try to stand up to ignorant people because that just puts you on a lower level. Just ignore them. Even if the person is an individual of authority over you, do not worry about that. As it says here, bend down your arms and bow your back. If you disagree, he will not side with you. Make little of the evil speaking by not opposing him. It means he will be dubbed an ignoramus when your self-control has matched his prolixity, so that others observing will recognize who's the more reasonable person. So it's advice that maybe we should still look at. The New Kingdom comes along and changes take place. A pharaoh that you may not have heard of was Hatshepsut, who was a woman, and this is what she builds for herself as a mortuary temple. It's a huge complex, literally carved into the sides and carved out of it. In case you can't tell, and I'll try to see if I can make this a little bit bigger. These are people, all here and here, And that gives you an idea just how large this complex is. It is a massive complex that was carved. Stories are put in with hieroglyphs inside. Some of those were later covered up because Hatshepsut became a figure that they wanted to overlook and forget, and so much was covered up. But she was also a figure who appears in the drawings that were eventually revealed through technology of being x-raying what had been put over it and seeing what was underneath it. She also is one, when I mentioned earlier about the donning of the beard in public to emphasize authority. It shows her wearing one. And again, this is in the Temple of Amun-Ra in Karnak, where you have column after column after column after column, and they are huge columns, as you'll see here. What eventually occurs is that you have a pharaoh rise whose name is Amenhotep IV, taking over for Amenhotep III. He becomes the pharaoh. He is married to Nefertiti, who was described as the most beautiful woman. And this is a statue of her that is currently in Berlin. But what we do know is that Amenhotep changed his name to Akhenaten. And he took the last part here that you'll see where it says Aten, A-T-O-N, and declared Aten to be the god. That all these other figures they had worshipped, Amun-Ra, Horus, Osiris, etc., were wrong. And excuse me for that. They had been wrong all these years. That there was only one god, Aten. Aten was the disk of the sun, what was in the sky, and that he, Akhenaten, formerly Amenhotep IV, was the chosen one by Aten to be his priest. Basically, Amenhotep IV, becoming Akhenaten, dissolved every other religion, eliminated the position of all the priests, who had made a very good living being priests for the different gods, and said there would be one god, and he moved the entire capital, control of government, to a new city that he had built called Amarna. And as such, he composes a hymn to the sun, a hymn to Aten. You have the details here. It was revolutionary. It was different. He literally dissolved everything. He did not sit well with a number of people. He did not live very long as pharaoh, less than 20 years. Some say that there are theories about the pharaohs having inbred, because brother and half sister might marry to preserve the royal lineage and keep everything within one family. And so you wind up having genetic disorders that led to early deaths. Others said that other theories about his demise, the priests who had been displaced conspired, and he possibly was poisoned. What we do know is that this image of Akhenaten, for the most part, was destroyed. Every references to his name, images of him were plastered over or broken. But a few did survive, eventually were found, and this is one that was found in Amarna during archaeological dig. And this shows us Akhenaten and Nefertiti. You'll see that she is on the same level as he. Remember in the Narmer palette how much larger Narmer was than everyone else. He's the king, he's the pharaoh. Well, here we have them equal. And Nefertiti actually did reign as a co-pharaoh with her husband. When he died, she reigned for a while before their son, seemingly their son, King Tut, became pharaoh. He did not live very long, either dying 18 or 19. But you have here the children, and you'll see that this image, when you go back and look at Narmer, and on the palette, Narmer is presented as large, strong, physically capable, we look at Amenhotep, and he is more common. There's none of this beard figure in here. You have the elongated neck, the very thin arms, a belly of some sort, maybe showing that again there was illness or something. The thin legs. All this is depicting not necessarily a strongly, powerfully created image of Pharaoh. But we do have the sun, Aten, here, shining down his blessings to these two. So it creates a different image. When Amenhotep IV, or Akhenaten, dies, Tut takes over. Of course, in the early 20th century, Howard Carter found the tomb of Tut. It was one that had not been raided because people had forgotten about Tut. Literally, when Amenhotep IV, Akhenaten, dies, Tut is eventually elevated, and everything is, Amarna is abandoned. They move away, they go back to the former cities, the former capital, and Tut dies early. He is buried and forgotten. As such, the grave robbers really didn't hear about a Tut, did not know his tomb was there, and so it was overlooked, which preserved all the treasures. This is the coffin of Tut, gold with semi-precious stones. It becomes a major find in the details. The death mask of Tut is such that it was an important figure. It went on tour. But one thing that happened a few years ago, curator of the Museum of Cairo, where this is on display, came in and went into a panic and tried to figure out what had gone on. This part, if I can get this part right here, the beard, remember you can see that this probably would have been a false appellation because he would not have grown one like this, very young. It had been broken off. Turned out that custodians, in trying to clean the area, one of them had accidentally broken it off and tried to fix it with epoxy glue. Not what you're supposed to do for precious metals. It took a long time to try to restore it, to clean off the epoxy without damaging any further, and eventually restoring it. In case you're wondering, the custodian did not keep his job. They tell you a little bit about that. We also have literature, poetry. We have tales, a narrative about what was going on, but especially poetry. You have, we don't always think of the Egyptians in writing literature, but they did. Meanwhile, we also have the Aegean, just north into the Mediterranean, the Isle of Crete. Eventually was called the Minoan culture, although the only reason it's called Minoan is a Greek myth about King Minos. You also have Mycenae, and you'll see that one here. Again, Mycenae and Argos are sister seas, sailing across a valley from each other. You have the sea-states, and that'll be for chapters 2 and 3. But what we do know about the culture is that the Minoan culture had a predated culture in this area on different islands in the Mediterranean, and eventually the Minoan culture possibly grew out of that. Not sure, but possibly did. And so you have Knossos, or Knossos, that was eventually found. In Greek mythology, Minos was a king who angered Poseidon, and so his wife Pasiphae was made to fall in love with a bull and gave birth to the Minotaur. To cover up his shame at this having happened, Minos, also pronounced Minos, had Daedalus, the great architect of the Greeks, to build a maze, the labyrinth. The Minotaur was put in the center of it, and Minos extracted a tribute from Athens each year of youths, and they would be sent, into the maze, the labyrinth, And the Minotaur, of course, would eat these individuals because it was a flesh-eating beast. Eventually, there's a story about how that ended, and that's with the figure of Theseus. But when this was found, it happened because of an individual who was determined to one-up Heinrich Schliemann. Schliemann had found Troy. The story of the Iliad had excavated the site, taking it back some time, and announced that he later would go on and also excavate the Mycenaean areas. So Arthur Evans, a British man who was an amateur archaeologist, was determined to find something of significance. He went to Crete, where there were stories about the culture, and eventually he found, as it says here, in serious excavation, a civilization older than the Mycenaeans. What Schliemann finding Troy than the Mycenaeans. Pottery was found, images, statues, many of them broken, but were able to put together. He eventually even uncovered the palace area, and so he called it the Minoan culture. He makes some changes. For instance, were they called Minoans? Probably not. But this was the palace that was found. This has been restored somewhat, painted, but it was found. You have the elaborate homes. You have frescoes that were discovered. Bull jumping seems to have been very popular. Bulls seem to be an important figure of this culture. And then this was found. It was found in pieces. What was interesting about this were the pieces were found. It's like it has a cat on its head. The arms here were found in different places. The hands and arms. There's a good chance that this is not how this figure actually looked. That this part and this part were added, because as pieces were found, Evans was determined to capitalize on this, and he had the workmen put things together, not necessarily where they should have been, and then they could make replicas of this and sell them, which is what he did. The language was found, there were writings, but here's the problem. It seems to be an early form of Greek that Linear B is. Linear A, as it's termed, they're not sure what it means. It's not deciphered. Linear B was an early form of Greek, and which probably means that it came much later. So Crete eventually declines. The Minoan culture ends. There's a chance that there were natural disasters, the explosions in certain areas of volcanoes creating large tidal waves may have helped to destroy the trading aspect that Crete was known for, the ships, etc., and decimated the population in that way. Eventually the Mycenaean cultures come in, and other areas are destroyed. The Mycenaeans, as I showed you earlier, are built on the mainland of the Peloponnesian Peninsula. They're an older culture, but they're also contemporary of many of the other city-states. And again, we'll be talking more about all these in chapters 2 and 3. Schliemann, as I mentioned earlier, had found Troy. He goes and also looks for Mycenae, connected to, because Mycenae was one of the major cities that was mentioned in the Iliad, and he found great treasure and great areas that show about the art and architecture. One of the things they found, this is the Citadel Mycenae, and literally you walk from down over in this area and up and into the city itself. Off over here are also other sites outside the walls where there would have been the homes and burial areas. This is the Lion's Gate that you use to walk into and then back up into the rest of the area. And again, Lion's Gate because of the images of the lions here. This is the vault, and this actually sits outside the walled city, but this would have been a vault, a storehouse, possibly maybe a tomb. Schliemann thought, but it's probably more the treasury area. And one of the treasures they found was this. It's called the Mask of Agamemnon. Probably did not belong to Agamemnon, but this is the Mask of Agamemnon. Gold, and there were other artifacts that were found of extensive gold and artwork, and again ceramics, metalwork, showing us just how advanced the culture was. And so what you wind up with then is a chapter that covers from about 40,000 or so BCE to about 1500 BCE. The next two chapters, again here are the summaries of it. The next two chapters are going to introduce you to more of the Greek culture and the development of the Greek city-states, and we're going to be looking at those. I'll be posting this and sending you a note. I apologize for the issues early in the video, but sometimes Cengage and Canvas have issues talking to each other.